Oh, tonight, our Brain Club is about transforming systems. It's the idea of thinking about, I think with Brain Club, we often talk about like what needs to be changed, what needs to be completely rethought and thrown out and started over. Who should be doing the rethinking, and how does that actually happen? And we'll talk about some approaches to that in a conversation with Dr. Winnie Luby. Before we get going, closed captions are enabled. You just have to toggle them on if you'd like to use them. Depending on your version of Zoom, you might see the live transcript closed captioning icon. If not, look for the more dot 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 and choose show subtitles, or you can choose hide subtitles if you want to turn them off. So if you're new to Brain Club, welcome. Brain Club is for everyone. Everyone's welcome. It's for neurodivergent people. It's for people who support neurodivergent people, people who are exploring whether or not they are neurodivergent, and anyone with any type of brain who wants to learn about neuro-inclusive culture. At All Brains Belong, we believe that healthcare is more than medical care, and so part of shifting the community conversation around neurodiversity and inclusion involves like really digging in and doing some collective learning and unlearning. So you are invited to be part of the ABB community, and we're really glad you're here. Brain Club is our education program for purposes of demonstrating our approach to neuro-inclusive culture, for purposes of shifting broader community awareness of the issues of concern and importance to the neurodivergent community, and to promote new ways of thinking and being, with the thought, the hope that then everyone goes forth into their lives and passes it on, and that's how culture change happens. So, Brain Club is a place where we provide education and model neuro-inclusive culture, ways of being a community through panels and guest speakers and book chats. It's not a place where there's medical advice or that we discuss any personal medical questions. And it's also not a support group. We have other programs for that, but this one is for education purposes only. It's a place where I'm hoping that we provide a way to better understand some neurodivergent experiences through presenter stories. And for many, this is a way to feel less alone, but it's not the right place to address individualized needs or requests. It's a place where you will tonight hear some I think very valid critiques and criticisms of systems that make it difficult for people to get their needs met. But we don't criticize individuals or groups of people. It's about systems and ways of things that can be done differently. We invite you to use the chat during Brain Club if you would like. We just ask that if you're going to use the chat, we ask that you focus your content directly about the content of the panel, with out of respect for our guest presenter. And you are welcome to share what a panelist says, how it impacts you, how you can validate what other people say. You can ask questions. We just ask that if you're going to use the chat, we ask that you use the big box instead of using like reply threads, because that makes the chat bounce up and down. And when a lot of people are doing that, then it becomes really hard for our staff to keep up. So thanks for using the big box. There are multiple right ways to participate at Brain Club. You can have your video on or off. Even if it's on, we don't expect anything of you. We certainly don't need you to sit still or look at the camera. We will have time for discussion after Dr. Levy's presentation and interview. But during discussions, you are welcome to use mouth words or the chat. You also can observe. Observation is a valid form of participation at all of our programs. And in addition to affirming all aspects of identity, we think about the group's collective needs taking priority over that of any one individual. So we orient our program that way and we moderate discussion accordingly. We invite you to listen, to learn, to observe what a neuro-inclusive space can look like. Maybe pick up some new ideas, things to think about, concepts. Lizzie's going to put in the chat our Brain Club Digital Resource Library if something comes up that you want to dig deeper into, and think about how what you hear connects to your life. If it's your first time at Brain Club, keep coming back. It might take a couple times to kind of figure out the flow, and Lizzie's going to put some frequently asked questions in the chat as well. Thank you to North Country Federal Credit Union and The Alchemist for sponsoring today's Brain Club. And it's been a real treat that we've gotten to learn more about how both of these organizations approach building inclusive workplaces and doing inclusive business, as we've had representatives from both of these organizations as panelists this month. So that's been really, really awesome. Thank you also to all of you who support Brain Club, and making it possible for us to provide this content week after week and provide a space for people to feel connected and to learn and unlearn together. All right, before we get going into today's topic, I do have some announcements. So first off, next week is a very big day here and really like around for lots of organizations. So next week is Giving Tuesday. It's an international day of supporting nonprofits trying to make the world a better place. And so if you are on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, we would love for you to look out for our posts throughout the day and share and repost them to amplify some of the things that we're talking about building a world that works for everyone. And this is the start, the kickoff of the You're Not Alone campaign. This is our annual end of year operational campaign that has two main goals. One is to spread awareness about neuro-inclusive culture and our mission and free resources. So it's an awareness campaign, and it's also a fundraising campaign to raise funds to support free public community programs like Brain Club. And we will look forward to kicking that off next week. We will also next week kick off our next month of Brain Club. It is our annual Brain Club Greatest Hits. This is my favorite month of the year for Brain Club, because it's really awesome to like look back at the whole year's worth of Brain Clubs and smush some themes together. So what this looks like is like a mosaic of integrated Brain Clubs, all kind of talking about the same theme, but by different people and in different ways. And it's really interesting to look back on, hey, that thing that someone said in April, how do I feel about that now? Because we all change and evolve throughout the year. And so it's, I think, a pretty awesome experience. So these are the themes we think that the whole year really spoke to. And we look forward to sharing that with you starting next week. The last week of December, the Tuesday, December 30th, there is no Brain Club. Instead, we have a special Brain Club on Wednesday, December 31st, as part of our fourth annual virtual New Year's Eve celebration that is open to the public, open to everyone. Lizzie's going to put a link in the chat to register. It's free, and we have all kinds of things. We have a special New Year's Eve Brain Club. We have parallel play, crafting, dance party for all ages, and a variety of live performances, as well as a raffle with really cool prizes. So we hope that you will join us for New Year's Eve. We would love, as we head into the end of the year, we'd love for you to join us as a community ambassador, virtually, just spreading the word about some of these programs and resources in different ways. And Lizzie's going to put a link in the chat if you might be interested in that, and we can connect with you. I think this might be my last announcement. I'm sorry for all my announcements. For this special New Year's Eve Brain Club, which is a community brain club, we started doing this last year where we had a prompt and we opened this up to our community. We asked the prompt and we asked people to send us 30-second selfies about that prompt. And that's how we made the Brain Club. And I thought it turned out amazingly last year. And so this year's prompt, what did you come to accept or learn about your brain this year? And so, Irene, this is what came to my mind when you brought up the tabs up in the chat, because, like, yeah, I accept that I have 1,000 tabs open, and so many other things. But I think that it can be really, really helpful to hear from other people and what they've observed and noticed about their own brains. Thanks, Lizzie, for putting that in the chat. And so we would love for you to participate. We'd love to get your submissions by next Friday, so that we can put together a special community celebration. Thank you. All right, tonight's topic. All right, so transforming systems. We're building upon our whole month together of transformation. That was been our month's theme. We started with looking at transforming self-narrative. We then moved on to think about transforming workplaces, transforming communities, and now we are diving into transforming systems. So what this will look like, I have a couple of slides, and then our interview with Dr. Luby will run about 16 minutes, and then we'll have time for discussion. So when we think about approaches to systems change, we have two. They don't necessarily need to conflict. They could be complementary approaches, but the idea is top down. You get someone who is in a position of power to decide to use that power and privilege to change a system by changing policies and structures that support making the system better. That is really hard. And we talk about this all the time at Brain Club, the barriers to top down systems change. But that's not the only way that systems change happens. Systems change can also happen from the ground up. So, bottom up systems change. It's a grassroots approach where the people most impacted by the way a system is going have their own solutions and model it and demonstrate it. And often that um, results in a different kind of cultural change. We may not have actually changed any laws or policies or structures, but we may have created something that works really well. And sometimes there are maybe these approaches can work in concert together. But the idea is that systems change from the ground up. This is a community centered, community driven process where, like we've been talking through the month, of solutions coming from those closest to the problem. That includes intersectional experiences of people closest to the problem. And it's a continual iterative process where we are constantly learning and unlearning and relearning and refining and wanting to know the impact of the changes that are demonstrated and implemented. It's really about demonstrating what can be done. It may or may not shift views of those in power. It may or may not result in top down change as a consequence, but sometimes it does. And so, within our work in many of our labs, we're often navigating both of those types of system change. We're asking, can we change the system from the inside? Can we build something outside of it? And where do those two paths meet or get in each other's way? And so, with that, I am so excited that we're joined asynchronously tonight with Dr. Winnie Luby, who is the academic coordinator at the UVM Center on Disability and Community Inclusion and a professor of disability studies. We are also honored that Dr. Luby has been part of our board of directors for I think 3 years now. So with that, I am going to stop share and reshare because I never click the sound button. And we'll watch this interview. The idea of systems change, and we've like talked, I've talked about systems change before, and like how that's like an important part of what we want all Brain Belong to be doing. Like, can you say like what system change like that means to you, or could mean to you?
Yeah, well, I think as we were talking about, ideas and energy and drive comes from the people up rather than, this top down where it's being dictated to you what you should be doing or not doing or how you should be doing it. Um, and the co-creation piece, I think, is part of that. Like if I think about, I always think about like say public services, like food stamps or Section 8 or Social Security or those kind of things. Like those systems would work so much better if they actually paid attention to how people are using it and the barriers that they're facing with it, right? If they were actually acting on the things that aren't working, it would be so much easier.
I could not agree more. And like, it's actually not that hard to ask people, even like, but I think it's a lens of, I want to know, I want real-time feedback on what I'm doing so that I can make little tinkers and adjustments. I wonder if in like a big system, you just realize that you couldn't even make changes, so why bother asking feedback? I don't know. What do you just What do you think about that?
Well, I think about the importance of having folks with lived experience in those positions that can make change at that level because of, otherwise you're kind of talking to the wall. Like you have a few people who kind of get it and they're sympathetic, but um, if you have people in positions of power who can actually lead the way and model, like this is a different way to do it, I think that's the way to have the change, really. So, like having, you're working with people about employment, I think that's a really powerful model for sure, because then those people can model for other people, right? That they can see that it can be done. Like I got asked to speak at a class a few months ago, and I was very open about my own like neurological challenges and my family and da 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 da. But I also talked about how I felt like I was in a very privileged place to be able to have a job that really valued all of those parts of me, right? And I had feedback from the students. They go, "Wow, it is possible to like actually be myself someplace and be valued and have work and take care of myself. Like I don't have to bend myself into these knots that aren't realistic, or I don't have to feel bad that I can't make my brain do something different than what it can do." Um, and so I think that's where those changes happen, right? Like those small moments where you can actually, you never know how you're changing somebody's life just by talking about something.
Right. Because I think that it's at least for me, sometimes I don't have language to understand my experience until I've heard someone else name it. And I'm like, oh, I would never have come up with those words, but that is the exact thing that goes on in my head. Wow. Whether I hear it or I read it or something.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it's just so, I think it's important that even though everybody can't be happy with everything, I think it's still important to have the platform and the opening there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to please everybody all
Right.
the. Mhm.
Right. Because if you're pleasing everyone, the only way to really do that is if you're serving a group of people who has homogenous goals. And,
Mhm.
there might be some reason for that if that's true. And it's okay to have a homogenous goal, like, a shared goal, like a shared vision, like, I believe that I want to come to a space where I can be my true self. Like we can agree on that goal. But it's more big picture as opposed to I want this program to look like this.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's great that you're still open to hearing all of that, even if some of those things people want aren't practical or they're hard to deal with or whatever. I think that you're providing the platform is the important part, right?
We are so proud of the model of co-creating programs with the people we're serving. And we're just so into that, and it's like really important to us, right? And then there's this balance between like, some centralization and some structure, and some, balancing the organization's needs with the needs of the people in it. It's the conflicting access needs.
I'm remembering when my younger daughter started preschool, um, and she'd just been diagnosed with autism. She's only 4. Her language is coming. Had lots of angry outbursts, right? And so, on the one hand, we want her to be able to express herself and tell us what's going on. On the other, she had to learn how to operate in this system where it wasn't okay to do that. And it's still tricky, right? She's 18 now, and it's still tricky. Like, it's okay to be yourself. And in this situation, you have to put a lid on it, you know. Yeah, that's hard with people you don't know. I mean,
I have always like, and maybe this is just my PDA, but like I've always just found most systems unsafe. Like they just like you can just like just even as a little kid being like, this makes no sense. This is arbitrary. This is not, this is not open to feedback. I remember even being like a middle schooler being like, why don't you ask the students? Why, anyway, it just always felt like not that systems are like really, maybe I could say this. Most systems are really designed to perpetuate systems. They're not really like, so it has always felt intuitive to me that starting over and starting something new, that wasn't part of a system, um, would be more effective, at least faster, at least faster to get some sort of impact to happen. And
Mm.
maybe it's just my brain that delayed gratification is really hard for me. I want the thing now. I want it right now. Not because I'm gonna get distracted, but because like it's otherwise just too hard. Anyway, but I think at All Brains Belong, it's all these little things that it would be really difficult to do in, let's say, a traditional medical system. But I think that having the opportunity to share what we're doing, has been really cool because some of it actually is reproducible
Mhm.
in traditional systems. But at least to get into the weeds of like, well, this is what our menu looks like this is what universal design for medical care looks like, and this is actually doable. You can just really, anyway. um but because I think, like you're saying, the student who for the first time hears that like it's a thing that you can be a professional with a job and like not be contorting yourself in 50,000 ways, like I think professionals also need to hear that you don't have to be tortured by the system you work in.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a very powerful kind of, I don't know if social justice is the right word, but I think the more people can be themselves in those situations, the more effective they're going to be, the more authentic it feels to interact with them when they're being their whole selves and they're not holding back something because they don't think, these other folks will want to hear it, but they can actually speak their minds a little. Like, um, yeah, like I really think I think the more, this is kind of like cheesy and hippy dippy, but I feel like if everybody felt empowered to be their true self, and you're not hurting anybody, you're just being yourself, right? And you pick the kind of job you want, you have the kind of family that you want, the friendships that you want, everybody be happy, right? We weren't like kind of feeling pressure to clamp down some pieces of ourselves, right? Um,
Totally. And think about how much like cognitive effort is required to like clamp down and suppress like all that. Well, it's funny you say that. I don't, maybe you know the story. I don't know if you know the story. The story of how Kid Connections got founded. Do you know that story?
so,
Oh my gosh, it's the best. Okay. So a then 8-year-old on the junior advisory board. We were like in a backyard, and I said, we've been really thinking about how do we help kids feel like they belong. Do you have any thoughts about that? And this sweet little love, he says, you let us do what we love.
mm,
What do you mean? Well, if I'm doing what I love and that kid's doing what they love, like we're gonna feel like we belong.
right,
So
right.
that was Kid Connections. Like that, I mean, that is system change from the ground up. This is like a sweet little love with a sweet little idea that changes the world. We've got 140 sweet little loves who now have friends. Like,
Nice.
and did school solve that problem? No. Right. So it sometimes just doesn't have to be so complicated.
Mhm. I agree. I agree. Definitely. Yeah, that's a great story. I'm glad you told me that. That's awesome.
Awesome.
Well, I think in my head, part of why I'm really enjoying being a part of all this journey is because the kernel of what you're doing feels so common sense, right? It's just so easy. And is if you're able to pass on the word as much as possible, I can picture like, 10 years from now, at least 4 or 5 other practices like yours would be amazing, right? Um, all over the country or wherever. Like I think that would be really, really great. really great. Yeah. And then for people to even know that it exists, they're like, oh, I can actually seek out practices like that. I don't have to stay with this thing that I don't feel good about. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, right? Because I think like so many people they've never like even in the healthcare space, they've never had a healthcare experience that feels safe and comfortable. They've never had a job where they could show up as their true self. They never had that, so they don't know that that's possible. So you see it. Hopefully you see it because you're experiencing it, but even if you don't, yeah, I hope that that does, does help adapt people's expectations of what they should be expecting and demanding
Yeah.
from their environments.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. But they should demand and expect, right? Like it's reasonable to expect that you're going to feel safe when you go to the doctor or any of those things. Yeah.
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 I would say, like, as a patient, like maybe about a year ago, I went in to get dental care, and there was like so much COVID going on, like so many people had COVID in our practice, and I went in, and like nobody was wearing masks, and it felt really unsafe. And then it's an open air thing. I'll edit all this out, but it's an open air thing, and the person in the stall next to me coughed, and I flipped out, and I walked out, and it was very difficult for me to get mouth words out, but all I was able to say is like, it's not safe here. And I walked out. I would never have been able to do that without my experience of transformation through the ABB village, because I am surrounded by people who think about safety and think about like, ooh, I have an internal body signal that sends me a clue that like something in my environment is not a fit for my access needs. Like, I didn't have that lens before this.
Wow. Wow. That's a really good, yeah, that's a really good example. That's good. Yeah. I didn't feel like I could talk about myself in any kind of deep way until I got involved with ABB. Really. I mean, it just like it spoke to me immediately as something that, like, you know what, Winnie, you're going to be 50 something. At some point, you're going to need to be authentic with people. Why not start right now?
That part of your journey, that's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's so interesting because it is like this grand social experiment of like, hey, I'm gonna show up and try to be authentic. You want to do it with me? I don't really know what that looks like. I've never really had it before, but let's do it. And I think there's so many people who are hungry for such a thing.
So too. I think so too. And when I'm with, in environments where I know people are, they're plenty nice, but I know they're not giving us the whole story, right? They're just kind of giving a mask of who they are. And now I sit in those meetings and I'm like, ah, that's too bad.
Yeah, it's too bad. It's like, oh, yeah, yeah. I
But
hope for
before it used to
you.
be like, oh, I wish I could hold it in that good.
Yes, like that's not even the goal, because
Right.
like now my expectation is authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Exactly.
awesome. Oh, thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to say before I shut off the recording?
No, just thank you for inviting me. And I really appreciate being a part of all this. I really, really do.
Thank you so much to Dr. Winnie Luby for that conversation. One thing I just want to share that I was starting to type at the end, but I didn't finish. I think that when we think about, because the end of that discussion was around authenticity and showing up authentically, I think it's also like a systems level analysis of what are the factors that lead someone to show up authentically. And I think that when an environment is unsafe to show up authentically, and we don't get to pick whether we feel safe or not, as we've covered many times at Brain Club, this is an involuntary automatic nervous system. It's neuroception threat detection that appraises cues from the environment. Lizzie, can you drop nervous system 101 into the chat, the recording from that? Thank you. Um, anyway, so with regard to the end of that discussion, I think it's just important to name, like, yes, it would be so great if everyone could show up authentically. It just happens to be that most environments are unsafe. So I just wanted to put that commentary in. Um, but I think what did stand out to me is the idea of getting feedback, integrating that feedback, sharing a goal of being responsive to that feedback. What stood out to others? What are you taking away from that conversation? Either in the chat or out loud. Hi, Paul.
uh bopping around doing stuff, and when you had the line that just meant, systems are meant to perpetrate systems, that was something that, really just sort of stood out to me, just because it is something that, just sort of naming it in a nice way, just of how when we go in different places there, if we try to accommodate our own needs, it's not necessarily receptive to it.
Absolutely. I mean, there's this, whole science of organizational design and, systems organizations are the results that a system gets. It are the results that the system was designed to get. And a lot of the dysfunction that comes with that, is also part of the design. Thanks, Paul. Anybody else? Anything that stood out for you, or things you're thinking about? What's coming up? Hi, Sierra.
Hi. One thing that came out for me was that there were like 4 or 5 times tonight between the video and in the chat of just seeing the power of people talking about our brains and how it works and what it looks like to like create a world and advocate for systems to be created around our brains, and how immediately other people have that, oh, that's my experience too, but not just that, but the I don't know, just the power of shame reduction in that I think was really palpable for me tonight. And yeah, it makes me really excited for December Brain Club because I think that'll be a big part of it.
I totally agree. Thank you. Thanks for bringing that up. I think that um we had another group this week where the topic came up around, like, the difference between shame as a noun versus shame as a verb. When you can shift to recognize that someone is shaming you, or that it's not that you are in a place of shame. I think the experience is very different. And so, even in the example of me talking about, walking out of a healthcare encounter, I mean, I felt terrible in that moment. That was now a year and a half ago. But that was, like, really, really dysregulating. And I felt terrible and, like, so terrible. But which is why I tell the story all the time, because I think it's important. I think it's important that people know they're not the only ones who feel unsafe in healthcare. And I do think that now, when things happen that are unsafe in healthcare, I can recognize that it's not me, because I've been practicing looking for those cues. And I think that that's, like, one of the things that I think that we do for one another in this community, is that, oh yeah, now I have a way of looking at that. I'm going to try that on and think about it, and now I'm going to look for it. And now, and maybe not even in such a long time, I think that that lens shifts. Yeah, so Steve's bringing up the idea of systems that are channeling behavior. I don't know. I don't know. I do think that when people have a lot, behavior is communication. Behavior, as Stuart Shanker says in Self-Reg, that behavior is the way the nervous system communicates, like what's going on at the underlying physiology of what's happening beneath. And so I do think that when people have their access needs met, um, I think you're welcome, Steve. Thanks for making me feel safe enough to disagree with you. Um, anyway, I was going to say that when people have their access needs met, I think that the behavior that shows out is more like regulated behavior. When people don't have their access needs met, I think the behavior we see is dysregulated behavior, and that can look all different ways, including, sometimes we talk about at Brain Club a lot, like sometimes when there's a power dynamic, the person with more power turns their access needs into policies, and a lot of times that happen. Oh, thanks, Lizzie. A lot of times that happens extra when the person in power is dysregulated. So I think just having a lens. Yeah, we all have systems. Yeah, we have systems. We're intentional about them. Yeah, and a lot of times a lot of times systems, like personal systems that people build, are to promote regulation. We may not necessarily know that we're doing it that way. And when we have the kind of brains that derive safety from predictable systems, when we don't have them, or when something happens that runs counter to the predictable system that we have, I have a system in my mind about how human beings are supposed to treat one another. And when behavior arises that counters that, that's really dysregulating for a lot of us. Sierra says, when we're so used to having systems that don't meet our access needs, we don't know what it looks like for a system to intentionally focus on meeting the access needs of its people. Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know, like 4 years into this grand experiment here, I don't know that it's like that hard to center the access needs of the people. Like, it's not that hard. It's just that there's going to be trade-offs, and we all have to like be on board for the trade-offs and to be transparent about them. And like, even, in our medical practice, like I think our patient community values their own access needs being respected and valued. And so like they think this is what I think, at least. I think most people think it's like pretty normal that we who work here would have access needs that also need to be accounted for. And it's just like, okay, how are we gonna figure this all out? Yes, Steve, we can create our own systems. And that's that whole bottom up. Thanks, Ian. Um, um, we're all doing it together. And I think that, even when we have to interact in cultures that don't prioritize access and don't think about things like neuroception and regulation and all these like science things that are happening, they're happening whether people call it or not. But when people aren't thinking about that all the time, and then people have reactions and judgments and all kinds of things. And then you can return to your home base where people get it. And I think that's where that process of, at the end, I think how I said it was just, you shift what you can demand and expect from your environments. I think we can only really do that if we spend enough time with people who get it, and that we can actually like distinguish between environments that meet our needs versus environments that don't meet our needs. Alvar says, I appreciate the reminder of not getting to choose whether an environment feels unsafe. Yeah, I've been frustrated lately as my dysregulation and meltdowns have increased as I've been forced to engage so frequently with unsafe systems. Yeah. Obviously, it would be ideal to engage less or not at all with unsafe environments and systems, but unfortunately not an option, perhaps as chronically ill autistic, when the healthcare system is the main perpetrator of harm. Amen, Alvar. Yes. Yep. ABB does give me hope that the medical system can be different, and it doesn't always have to be that way. Thank you, Albert, for saying that. And I'm so sorry that you, like, we we have a habit around here of like we hear a story that is so classic of the defaults of the healthcare system resulting in harm to patients, and it'll just be like, yeah, I mean, you were healthcareized, oh, that was expected. That's the healthcare system. And like, why is that? Why is that? And I do think that when people talk about systems change of the healthcare system in particular, I mostly hear people talking about top-down changes. We need single payer, we need this, we need that. And like those things probably would be helpful. But I don't want to wait for that. And we don't have to. Yeah. Hi, Anne. Uh-oh.
Hi.
Oh, there you are. Now I hear you.
Hi.
Perfect.
Hi. I think that's what struck me is this the talk about like like how things happening on the ground level and how, and then, so I'm interested when you say like, you don't have to wait for that to happen. Cause I understand that like you have people working at and people that have that language and have that experience that can be part of that change. And do you see that like, I mean, I've been so interested being here because I've seen different people and they're presenting things. And how do you see that playing out in other medical places in your area where they seek you out because they want to see systems designed differently? Because I mean, overall, it would improve. I mean, just to me, it just seems like a no, like that's what you would do. So I'm just interested if you have any other.
Yeah. Sierra, you raised your hand. Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I think when I've seen it's a really good question, Anne, and I think when I've seen that happen, it's been when a patient brought up to their provider, hey, like I'm not getting this need met, or I feel like I need this, and either like I saw this resource or the provider kind of seeks it out themselves. So I think it's to me, it's been telling that that's the way that been created is kind of from that bottom up kind of advocacy and um, pursuit of trying to get access to things that people don't have access to.
And what I would add to that is from the onset, we have been very intentional of not going around telling the people they're doing it all wrong. Like people don't like that, hey, you're harming the patients. Like, I mean, I think maybe now I say that more, but at the beginning, I really didn't say that very much. I think that what we have done is like kind of we created resources that made people in traditional healthcare environments, we made their lives easier. Like, so within the construct of a 10 to 15-minute visit, that's the healthcare system thwarting not only patients, but thwarting clinicians. Like, to name that, is important. And so we did that. And then we created a bunch of resources that would help people like take better care of their patients who have complex medical conditions that are impossible to manage in 10 minutes. In a way that you treat one problem at a time because the system tells you you have to, and you get in trouble if you address too many problems at a time. And this is like, like Steve said in the chat around, systems are designed perfectly designed to get the results that they're designed for. So that's what happens in healthcare. So I think that was our approach, is like kind of showing up in the usual concept, the usual context, like, giving presentations at the conferences that people go to, and then like having really useful tips and resources and having them be free. And I think like that has been our approach of just like trying to be useful. And does everyone get it? No. But when people are dissatisfied, when they can shift their own thinking about what a professional can expect and demand from their own environment, and recognize there's a gap between what they're seeing and how they wish it to be for themselves or their patients. I do think that's where really good conversations come from, and that gives me a lot of hope. And so with that, thank you all so much for being here and being part of this conversation. And we look forward to seeing you next week. I'm gonna remind us what our first topic of Brain Club Greatest Hits. Yes, learning to trust. So we'll see you next week. Have a good week. Bye.